Hi, this is Enrico Nardone, the director of the SeaTuck Environmental Association, with a presentation on alewives and the 2014 Long Island Volunteer Alewife Survey. This presentation is in response to the um, great number of inquiries we've had about the survey as a result of the Newsday article by Nick Spangler. Thanks everybody for your interest. Thanks to Nick for the story. And I hope this presentation is enough to get everybody involved in the survey. So this quick workshop, I'm going to give you a basic background on alewives and then walk you through the survey. We usually conduct this survey as a live training session, but given the large number of people that are involved and the difficulty of trying to schedule it, I'm trying to create something that people can view on their own time. So we start with this Greek word diadromos. It's divided into dia and dromos. The root of the word is running and through. So these fish that fall into this category are fish that migrate between fresh and salt water. They split their life cycles between these two different habitats. There's two categories of diadromy. The first is catadromy. So these are catadromous fish. These are fish that, again, have that root of running, but down. So these are fish that spend most of their lives in freshwater and migrate to the sea to breed. And there's not as many fish that fall into this category. In fact, we only have one on Long Island that fits this category, and it's the American eel. So these are fish that are all hatched out in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean in the Sargasso Sea and migrate into freshwater streams up and down the East Coast before completing their life cycle 20 or 30 years later when they move back out to the sea to spawn. But this presentation is about anadromous fish. So again, this root of this word is running, and these are fish that run up. So fish that spend most of their lives at sea before migrating into freshwater to breed. The most common species, of course, that everybody knows is the salmon. These are the fish that are jumping up waterfalls and over grizzly bears to reach spawning habitat in rivers of the Pacific Northwest and Alaska, and to some smaller extent, the Atlantic salmon on the East Coast. There's other species of fish that we do have in New York that fall into this category, including Atlantic sturgeon, American shad, and striped bass. These fish, all like Atlantic salmon, never spawned historically on Long Island, largely because our tributaries were not large enough to accommodate these bigger fish. The only species that we had on Long Island are river herring, and there's two species of river herring, blueback herrings and alewives. And the understanding is that Long Island hosted both of these species. We have mostly focused on alewives because there's more evidence that their populations still exist to some extent. We have had no sightings of blueback herrings on Long Island. It doesn't mean that they're not potentially here or could recover here, but for now we're focused on alewives. These fish are large schooling fish and that exist in large schools out on the continental shelf. They grow to be about a foot long. That's a full-size adult, 12 inches, maybe up to 14 or 15 inches, but mostly in that 1 foot range. This is their historic range from the Carolinas up to the maritime provinces of Canada. There's Long Island to your bearings. In the winter, these fish are off on the continental shelf. Biologists don't know a lot about their movements, but we know that they're, again, out in these large offshore schools, sometimes mixed schools. And while they're out there, they're being preyed upon and helping to drive that offshore ecosystem. Everything from whales to dolphins to tuna are feeding on them. And then when the time is right, in the early spring, they start to split up out of these large schools into smaller groups and move into estuaries up and down the coast. And as they move into these estuaries, like the Great South Bay or Long Island Sound, they're feeding another cast of characters, from bluefish to striped bass to seals that are making a recovery on Long Island. They're an important prey species in the spring. And then, so after staging in the bays for a while, they're waiting for the water temperature of the tributaries to be about 47 or 48 degrees. And when that temperature is right of that fresh water coming out of the streams, they migrate upstream to spawning habitats. And they're generally they're not jumpers like salmon, but they're capable swimmers, and they will go upstream as far as they can. They're looking for shallow, calm, clear waters, or historically kettle ponds, like Big Fresh Pond on the South Fork. Now, as they move into the rivers, they're feeding another whole cast of characters, from cormorants and great blue herons to river otters and raccoons. Herring gulls, of course, get their name from their pursuit of these fish. Here's two herrings fighting over a river herring, two herring gulls fighting over a river herring. And osprey, of course. Long Island was once a global stronghold for these birds that were sort of nearly wiped out by DDT, but have made a great comeback over recent decades. And their return to Long Island in the spring is basically timed to the return of the alewives. And you'll find these birds nesting around streams where they can easily get access to alewives and other fish. But alewives are certainly a favorite prey species. And this is a great photograph by Luke Ormond of an osprey with an alewife. This is the kind of habitat that the fish are historically looking for, this calm, clear waters in the headwaters of our coastal tributaries. So they're getting up there and getting into this circular spawning behavior. They're not nest builders like some other fish species. These are broadcast spawners that are dispersing eggs into the water column over the course of a couple days, maybe weeks, and then they are not dying in the streams like some salmon species do, but moving back out into the estuaries and eventually back out to the ocean. Each female can lay up to 250,000 eggs. These eggs hatch into small fry and spend some time in the streams before starting a slow movement back down the streams and out into the estuaries. By the time they're 3 or 4 inches long, they're already back out into the bays and headed out to the ocean again to rejoin these big offshore schools of fish. And they repeat that cycle and return back as mature adults within 5 to 7 years. And so the question is, what's wrong with that story? We wouldn't be here talking about alewives if everything was working the way it's supposed to. The fact is, these fish are not doing well. And in 2006, they were listed as a federal species of concern because of plummeting populations. In 2012, elevated as a candidate for listing on the Federal Endangered Species Act. And that listing was denied in 2013, but only because of a lack of data, not because of any evidence that they weren't in trouble. And this listing is going to be revisited in the next 5 years. And I do tell people that regardless of what the decision was about the alewives' status of their population coastally up and down the East Coast, they are certainly in trouble as far as Long Island is concerned, and any effort to sort of improve their population would go a great way towards improving the ecosystems here in the Great South Bay and the Peconic Bay and Long Island Sound. Why are these fish struggling? Well, they are often caught up in offshore fishing efforts and get caught as bycatch when big trawling boats are after other targeted species. When they can get in stream, they find poor water quality, which often reduces their spawning success and reproductive success. And the big one for us, at least on Long Island, is habitat loss, and these fish are just not getting access to the fresh water that they need to spawn. Uh, and this is true up and down their range, of course. Why? Largely because of dams, and these dams, these walls of concrete are permanent barriers to alewives. They cannot jump like salmon, so hitting a dam like this at the uh, Hards Lake in South Haven County Park is a permanent, impenetrable barrier to them. And almost every tributary that we know of on Long Island was dammed, not just once, but often multiple times. This is a listing based on a study done by Nelson Pope and Voorhees of barriers on several Long Island rivers. This is the table for the Carmen's River, and you can see how many not only dams but road crossings where the culverts for the roads themselves create barriers for the fish. And you can see everywhere it's listed as a permanent barrier, as a place where the fish have no hope of passage without some sort of help. And this is the list for the Browns River. You can see how many barriers these fish have to deal with. So people ask me why. Well, so what? Why should we care about this foot-long fish that comes in out of the ocean and doesn't necessarily have the best habitat? Why should we be concerned? And I go back to all these species that we mentioned earlier, from out on the continental shelf into the estuaries and up through these rivers. All along the way, these fish are helping to drive the coastal ecosystem, and they're moving energy out of the ocean into our upland streams, depositing eggs, which help to feed lots of other critters along the way, and really are a missing part of what was a once very healthy, functioning ecosystem. I tell people, so if that's not enough, maybe you don't care about all these other species, but maybe you want to catch some fish, or you know somebody who's an angler that likes to go out and catch striped bass, or bluefish, or fluke, or flounder. All of these species either directly pursue alewives or the young coming out of the tributaries. So if you want to catch fish, you should care about alewives. If you don't fish yourself, maybe you like to eat fish. So I tell people, if you like to enjoy the many great seafood restaurants on Long Island, you should care about alewives. So that brings us to the Long Island Volunteer Alewife Survey. We have been pursuing this survey strategy over the past 8 or 9 years, and really trying to get citizen scientists out across the island to as many tributaries as we can to help find what we refer to as remnant runs of alewives. And once we find evidence that these fish are still coming into the streams, and by remnant run we mean not a full successful run where they have access to the best habitat, but even in places like this where they can get into Hards Lake and it's not pristine, perfectly fresh water. It might be brackish water. They still have some ability to spawn, and will continue to try. They're sort of well off the optimum conditions on the bell curve, but they're having some spawning success. So these these tributaries, instead of supporting millions of fish potentially, or maybe only have a few thousand or a few hundred fish coming back to spawn, but they are in some places continuing to persist even after hundreds of years. So we are trying to find where these fish still exist, because when we can find them, then we can justify pursuing funding to help them and get them and restore them to the tributaries, and call it a restoration because we know they're there, and we can pursue state and federal funding for this work. So in the case of the Carmen's River at Hards Lake, the evidence of the fish existing at the base of this spillway helped to secure funding to install this fish ladder on the Hards Lake Dam. We've had similar success in Babylon at the Carls River, where our volunteer survey documented fish in the spillway and downstream from the spillway and the corals. We use that evidence in an application on behalf of the village of Babylon to the federal government, and we're able to secure a grant to help install a fishway in the Argyle Lake dam that was installed in the spring of 2013 and will be hopefully used by fish for the first time in 2014. This fishway, located at the Red Star there at Argyle Lake, will give fish access not only to the lake itself, but to a half mile or so of really nice habitat north of the lake before they get to Southard's Pond. And this access these fish have for the first time in 120 years or so since Argyle Lake Dam was built. So we're excited about that. And then this is an example of what happens to these fish when they hit these dams. And this is a place where we've had success in the Peconic River of moving fish past the first dam at Grangeville Park in Riverhead, and they can get about a quarter mile or so upstream on one branch of the river called the Little River, and this is where they hit the next wall of concrete at Woodhull Dam. But this is a sandy-colored pool, as you can see from the edges, and everywhere that you see black marks on the sides, or that mass of dark area in the middle, is alewives. And this is a place that was a permanent barrier for them until about 10 years ago, when a group of dedicated citizens started lifting some of these fish over by buckets, and then installed a temporary fish ladder and ultimately a permanent fishway to move these fish. And the fish populations have rebounded. So where we can restore access to upstream habitat, these are resilient species that will rebound. This run in the Peconic River is now estimated upwards of potentially 100,000 fish. So there is potential for a gain here. This is an underwater video shot by Chris Scott, runner of the DEC at Woodhull Dam. You can get an idea of what these fish look like underwater in their circular spawning behavior. And these fish instinctively have a desire to just keep swimming upstream. They follow that flow of fresh water as far as they can, and these fish are at the end of the road. They can't go any further. The county is pursuing a study to try to get the fish past Woodhull Dam, and we're excited about that possibility. But for now, this is as far as they can go. So the basic approach and goals of the survey is to just get as many people out, as many eyes on the tributary as we can, looking for these remnant runs in the spring. It runs from March 15th through May 15th. And the goals are just to document where these existing remnant runs might be. When the fish are moving, we found that they are sort of temperature dependent. So with this cold year, the runs are behind where they were last year as they wait for warmer water. And then, where possible, to try to estimate the size of these runs over time. Our 2014 goals are just to build on some of the success we've had over the past couple of years and to continue to strive for more distributed effort across the season. Too often we have people excited about surveying in early part of the season in March, and then as the season wanes, they sort of fall off. We'd like to keep people looking right through the season, because we have had some tributaries where the fish show up later than others and surprise us. So we want people to sort of keep their eyes on these streams as long as possible and stick with the survey through its completion. And as always, we're looking for places where we haven't seen herring in the past, and looking for these remnant runs. I don't like to use the phrase needle in a haystack. I feel that might be a little too pessimistic, but where you're talking about potentially thousands or even just hundreds of fish coming into a system, and you don't know when they're going to be there, and conditions might not be right to see them. The chances of seeing them in some places can be very small, but obviously the more people we have looking, the better our chances are. So if you're interested in participating, where to survey? This is not an in-stream survey. We don't want people getting wet. We want people high and dry out of the water. Often on the first overpass, either on the barrier itself where possible, or on a bridge, sometimes just above or below the barrier, where you can look into the stream and see where these fish might be gathered. Places where the flow gets constricted together and pushes the fish into a small area is helpful. Obviously, the clearer the water is, the better, and shallow water is, of course, easier to see the fish than deeper pools. When to survey? Ultimately, any surveying is good surveying, and we'll take any data that we can get. We want people to try to do it as often as they can, if they can do it weekly or twice a week, every couple days. But again, we'll take any surveying that we can get. So even if it's anytime that it fits into your schedule, every couple of weeks or something, but as routinely and regular as you can be with it, the better. And varying the times of day is important. We don't want always just get the data from the same time of day and same tide. So varying the time that you go out in the tide cycle increases the chance of seeing fish and improves the survey. And the only thing we ask is that you stay at the site where you decide to survey for at least 15 minutes, and you can move around that given body of water or that pool where you're going to survey, but try to keep your eyes fixed on the same general location for 15 minutes before moving on. How to survey? Just try to get the best view you can into an area of the stream, and where you can see into the water without too much glare. Alewives will be easier to see against a light background as opposed to a dark background. And you're looking for these schooling fish. Again, they're going to be moving in this circular pattern around each other once they've reached this sort of spawning behavior, and they're not trying to move any further upstream. And you have to look carefully. They're easy to miss. They're not like goldfish in a pond that just jump out at you. They are cryptic. They're evolved to be hard to see from above. They're trying to avoid being eaten by ospreys, so they don't want to be too obvious. And so you really have to look carefully and be patient. And you have to be aware of imposters. I mean, there are other fish in the rivers, and you have to sort of know what you're looking for. Alewives are about a foot long. You could see carp, which are considerably bigger, maybe twice or three times as big. There's other species that you could encounter. But alewives are, if you're not looking for fish more than a foot long. They're relatively small. They are dark above, so they're going to be easier to see against a shallow background. They're going to be gathered in groups, swimming around in circles. Here's some identified alewives in this slide. They're going to be much easier to see, as this slide shows, over a light background. So in this case, over the aquatic vegetation, as opposed to the sandy, dark substrate there. And you got to watch for other species like trout, as we said, that you might also see in the water. So what to record? We have a form that includes these basic columns, as sort of the name of the location and the best that you can identify where on that stream that you are, the date, time, the tide stages, you can figure it out. If you have access to a thermometer, you can get water temperature, that's helpful. Basic weather conditions, and then just a yes, no if there's alewives, and a guess, and your best estimate as to how many you're seeing. And then any other notes. We're eager to hear that you see, for example, scales, shiny scales on the side of the stream. That's evidence that an osprey or raccoon or something was preying on alewives. The presence of herring gulls, cormorants, osprey, those are all signs that even if you can't see fish, there may be fish there. This is a survey form which is available to download from CTUC's website, where you would take this on a clipboard or something out to your site and record your visits. And then you can either send this form when you're done at the end of the season back to us, or Ideally, we'd love for you to get onto our online reporting option, which is available through our website. And this is our Observer data form. And it's a simple, you fill out the basic same information. It gives you the options for either picking one of the tributaries or adding a new one. And it will remember your information so you don't have to, it'll autofill for you. You don't have to retype everything every time you do it. Other considerations, please be safe if you're going to participate. Stay out of the water. Don't put yourself at risk of harm. Call me if there's any questions, and if you think you see fish, we will send somebody to confirm or to meet you and confirm that they're alewives. Polarized lenses, if you have access to a pair of polarized glasses, are very helpful in looking into the water and recommended. And then any photographs or video, if you want, and can take pictures, do send them along to us. It will help us confirm what you're seeing, and we might share them with other people. That's all. I encourage you to let me know if you are going to survey, where you're going to survey, and then do try to use the online form. And call me if you have any questions. I'm happy to help you through any other details. And thank you so much for your participation. And good luck surveying for alewives. Bye now.